Hello and welcome to BYJU'S IAS. Let's get started and look into the first article. The first article says, in the pandemic, the disabled remain an invisible minority. This article discusses the plight of the disabled and their families amidst the COVID-19 crisis. This can be compartmentalized into four different segments. We will be discussing about livelihood and employment provisions, accessibility issues, mental health concerns, and educational sector issues. First, let us discuss about the livelihood and employment opportunities. The disabled community are part of a population which is already marginalized. They have very limited opportunities, low earnings, and they are the most affected by various crises that is surmounted on them. They struggle with their precarious employment, low earnings, minimal benefits, and they also have insufficient economic security. The COVID-19 pandemic has exacerbated this issue. It has increased tensions for them, and unfortunately, majority of the disabled community people have lost their jobs as well. Now that they have lost their jobs, this also leads to their family and their people suffering because of job losses. This has led to poor health in the society and also inferior quality of life because they have lost their jobs, and unfortunately their lives and quality of lives are also disturbed. Who is to be blamed for this? Is it the government? Is it the employer or the inaccessible healthcare because of COVID-19? Everyone takes charge of their blame. The government should have provided the security means, the social security employment provisions for the disabled. The same is not provided. The employer should have taken the disabled, keeping in consideration the disastrous consequences of this COVID-19. The employer has not taken the responsibility. The blame has to go with the government as well as the employer, says the article. Families now have got absolutely no support from the government as well as from the employer, is the first key argument put forward under this article. When we look at the government, when we look at the political parties, every political parties for that matter have a religious cell. They also have a minority cell. They also have a women cell as well. All these cells mean that they are working for the cause of a particular community. But does any political party have one particular cell which speaks about the disabled community? Unfortunately, no, says the article. As a result of all this, there have been some calls by the activists that there should be reservation for these disabled community in the parliament as well as in the legislative assembly. Only the disabled, when they have their reservations, they would be able to put across the plight of these people and their sufferings. We do not have the reservation, so a reservation call by some of the activists have been put forward. Next, what we have to discuss is with respect to the accessibility. It can be broken down into two important points. One is for those people who are disabled and have been infected by COVID-19, and the other is that they are disabled and they do not have relevant information about this infection. First, let us look at those type of issues where those disabled are infected by COVID-19. What exactly are the sufferings for those who are in quarantine centers? There are people who have walking disability. They have spinal cord issues, and these people have difficulty in accessing the quarantine centers as well as the hospitals. They lack accessible toilets and other disabled friendly features as well. So what the article suggests, that in case there are people who have been hit by this COVID-19 infection, such people will require certain other provisions that needs to be provided by the government. Then there are other set of people who are not impacted by this COVID-19 infection. That is, they are personally not infected, but they have other sufferings as well. Let's take the example of the deaf people. They do not have information that is given to them in the sign language. That is the major hindrance. With respect to the blind people, government websites are not accessible to the blind as they do not follow the blind standards prescribed by the World Health Organization. So here what we see is information lacunae, informational deficiency. The deaf are not getting information in the sign language. The blind are not getting the information that is required as per the blind protocols prescribed by the World Health Organization. And in case there are caregivers for these people, the disabled community and those caregivers happen to be in quarantine center or they are infected, who is going to take care of this disabled person is another question that is haunting the disabled community. The third argument put forward by the article is with respect to the education sector. We have students who have been suffering because of the COVID-19 crisis. Regular classes are not happening. They are not able to go to the schools and colleges. This is where the government and majority of the private institutions have stepped up, and they are providing content as well as video for all the student community. But one community which is suffering the most is the disabled community. There might be people who are deaf who might not be able to listen to it. There might be people who are blind who may not be able to see the visual content. So where is the inclusion of people with disabilities in the online education? Does the government know how many people are disabled and how are they being catered to? Do they have scribes in case exams are prescribed? Are there websites which are equipped to deal with visual disorders? Are some of the other questions pointed with respect to the education sector. Apart from all these physical issues, there have been mental issues as well. The disabled sector have also been going through mental issues as well, psychological problems. They are not able to tell the people, and as a result of this, this has led to invisibilization and stigmatization among the disabled community. All this means that they are the major sufferers, and this has to be taken seriously by the government. The government in itself has not been quiet. They have taken number of steps as well. The center government has recently asked the state governments to provide all information of the pandemic in braille language, audible tapes and video graphic material with subtitles and sign language interpretation. So the central government has advised the state government that, dear state governments, please do provide all these types of information so that these disabled community are not at inconvenience. And at the same time, they have also come up with the comprehensive disability inclusive guidelines, and this has been shared by the Ministry of Social Justice and Empowerment with all the state governments, and they have asked the authorities to provide online counseling mechanisms to de-stress all those people who have been suffering from the mental health. So the central government has made it very clear with its comprehensive disability inclusive guidelines that mental health for the disabled community will also have to be considered by the state government. Apart from this, the article further gives certain recommendations. The steps have been taken by the government, but there are some problems which has to be addressed. Addressing these key problems is what the article says is the crux of addressing the issues. What are these recommendations? The invisible and the vulnerable minority have become more isolated, ignored and excluded, sometimes by the government. So what we require is interlinking of various policy makers. The disabled issue is not related to a single department or to a single ministry. It will require a fruitful discussion by multiple policy makers. So what it has suggested is to create a joint secretary level position for the disability affairs in the health department, home and information broadcasting ministries, so that they would be able to gel up all the issues with respect to the disability. These officers would also have to connect with the department and also the concerned ministries, ensuring disability is taken care of during this crisis. What we need to assure during this period of crisis is to bring a policy change and make these people more inclusive, more intrinsic at government, corporate and social levels is what this article all about. Now let's look into the next article. This article says the need for an anti-discrimination law. This article discusses about discrimination present in India and world over. It looks at how people have been discriminated on the basis of race, religion, caste, language and gender. Examples for the same can also be considered. Blacks are not respected in the American society. There is racial bias. Similar issue was also persisting in South Africa, which had resulted in apartheid. Religion has become the battleground for superiority. People are denied houses for rent and for the sale of property as well. Several huts belonging to the Dalit community in Jaunpur in Uttar Pradesh was set ablaze after groups clashed over minor issue, which is exasperating the caste discrimination. Women even now are controlled by the patriarchal society. Job opportunities are limited, salaries may vary for the same kind of job that they perform. This can also be directly related to when women are paid very less than men when it comes to the daily wage workers. This is what is discrimination according to the author. So the author brings into discussion multiple case laws to substantiate that there is prejudice mindset which is ingrained in all of us because of our social environment, and this has manifested into atrocities. Let us try and understand some of the case laws as discussed under this article. First, he brings into notice the US Supreme Court's ruling in Griggs vs. Duke Power Limited in the year 1971. United States of America had a law. This law is what is called as US Civil Rights Act of 1964. What does it do? It makes the racial discrimination in private workplaces illegal. So if there is an employer and if he is racially abusing the other person, this becomes illegal. So there cannot be any option of racial discrimination when the employer is hiring another person from a different racial background. This is the case all about. When you look at this particular case, there are two important people. One is the employer, the other is the employee. The employees here, majority of them belong to the African American community, and the work that they were wanting to do was with respect to the manual work. This did not require much of education, nor this did not require any of the aptitude tests. This is when the employer comes up with a criteria that in case there are people who are wanting to enter this particular profile, they have to pass an aptitude test. An aptitude test for the manual work is something bizarre. This is where the employees approach the Supreme Court of United States of America. The United States of America looks into this particular issue, gives out a beautiful judgment. It says that this particular call for conducting an aptitude test was discriminatory in nature. Why? When you look at that particular region, majority of the African American community was not educated. They were doing all these manual work because of racial discrimination that was perpetuated on them from a very long period. Now, if you are keeping this type of aptitude test for a manual work, this is discriminatory in nature, and it struck down this aptitude test and asked the employer to provide employment opportunities to the African American community. This gives rise to a new concept called as disparate impact. So what is this concept of disparate impact as put out in United States of America's judgment with respect to Griggs versus Duke Power in the year 1971? According to this judgment, on the face of it, whenever there has been an employer or there has been an educational institution, on the face of it, it might not look discriminatory. But when you look at it in a deeper aspect, it is discriminatory in nature. So when it comes to the employment opportunities or with respect to hiring or with respect to promotion, training and development, in fact even with respect to performance appraisals, that you have a driven criteria where you are omitting certain section of the people on the basis of discrimination indirectly and not directly, that could make sure that certain section of the people do not get benefits because of it, and ultimately this is discriminatory in nature. So this is not a direct discrimination but an indirect discrimination. How indirect discrimination? The criteria is put such a way that majority of the people from a particular community, from a particular race, from a particular religion can be omitted because of this criteria. Such criteria, when it is imposed, that which is impacting a particular community, that is what is called as disparate impact, as majority of the people from that community are away from this benefits. This was also given in one of the beautiful judgments in Canadian Supreme Court in Andrews versus the Law Society of British Columbia. What does this particular judgment say? It says that discrimination is a distinction, compartmentalization and segregation of people, whether intentional or not. But what happens because of this segregation, the individual or the group may not be able to enjoy the benefits which is enjoyed by other set of people. Let's take the simple example. What the African American communities here are facing is discrimination. They have a distinction that is being done by the American whites. So all those benefits, that which is accepted, that which is benefited by the whites in the Americans, the same is not benefited by the black American community. This is just an example. So the Canadian Supreme Court in Andrews versus Law Society of British Columbia says that discrimination is a distinction where one set of people are able to take the advantage of it, derive benefits of it, but the same people who have similar educational qualification are not able to derive the benefits because of it, and that is what is called as disparate impact. This type of discrimination is present not only in United States of America or in any other country, but the same is also present in India, says the author. He brings into light one of the judgments, and that is with respect to Delhi High Court's 2018 judgment with respect to Madhu versus Northern Railway. What is this judgment all about? There are two people involved in this case. One is the wife, the other is the husband. They also have a child which also becomes a party to this case. What exactly happens in this case? The husband was employed with the railways. According to railway rules, in case there is a wife and the children, they should be provided all the medical expenses because the husband is employed with the railways. They were getting all employment provisions, that is with respect to the medical expenses, up until 2010. But after 2010, this railway employee disowned his family and had their names struck off the medical record. Because he removed their names from the medical record, the railways stopped giving all these medical benefits to wife as well as children. This is the contention. So the wife files a case in the Delhi High Court. The Delhi High Court looks into this particular case and they say that this particular order by the railway is completely illegal. Why? Is there a divorce between the husband and the wife? No. This husband has disowned his family and there is no separation of their family and there is no divorce in this particular case. Because there is no divorce, what you, the railway department, will have to do is to provide all the medical expenses provisions for the wife as well as children. They also come up with some of the beautiful lines. It has said the Constitution has included Article 15 and Article 16 because women have been subjugated previously. They have been discriminated and we have all historical evidence for discrimination and subjugation in the patriarchal society. If this medical service is removed for the woman who has been dependent on the husband, this ultimately caters to the historical denial of agency and this decision has a disparate impact on the women, says the Delhi High Court with respect to Madhu versus the Northern Railway. So it has gone with reference to the women and it has said that in case we are denying all these important provisions as a dependent on the husband, it ultimately perpetuates disparate impact, says the Delhi High Court, where a provision for gender equality has been taken with respect to historical consideration. The author here also brings into another case law which speaks about discrimination in terms of religion. The Zoroastrian Cooperative Housing Society versus District Registrar Cooperative Society and others. He says that this Zoroastrian Cooperative Housing Society was registered as a society. It had their own bylaws and according to its bylaws, only Parsis could become part of this society. A logical conclusion would be a Parsi, in case he has a property or in case he has a plot, he would be able to sell only to another Parsi and not to a person of different religion. This, according to the author, is discrimination. The Supreme Court did look into this issue and the Supreme Court came up with a judgment that ruled in favor of a bylaw for a Parsi society that prohibited the sale of property to the non-Parsis. This right to forbid such a sale, the court ruled, was integral to the Parsis' fundamental right, which was associated with Article 19 and also associated with Article 29 of the Indian Constitution. According to the author, this particular judgment of the Supreme Court is discriminatory. Why? Because other religion people would not be able to buy the plot of this Parsi community. So according to the author, with reference to all these case laws that we just discussed, he says that discrimination is prohibited by the state, but at the same time perpetuation of this discrimination continues to be haunted by the private organizations and individuals. The same can be considered with respect to the South African Constitution. He says, according to the South African Constitution, this also provides legislative backing in Constitution, which also does not permit any type of discrimination by private organizations and individuals. The same legislative backing is not present in India, but there have been attempts to bring about this massive change with respect to discrimination by private organizations as well as private individuals. In India, there have been efforts. Some of the efforts include Shashi Tharoor introduced a private members bill in 2017, Center for Law and Policy Research drafted and released an equality bill in 2019, but all these attempts happen to be a futile exercise. Therefore, according to the author, if discrimination has to be eliminated, positive attitude has to be inculcated, justice has to be provided to the people of India, a law is a necessity to reverse our deep-rooted culture of discrimination, says the author. Are these case laws important? No. This is just for your understanding, but the concept behind it is very important. Now let's look into the next article. This article says no longer special, and that is the relationship between India and Nepal. India and Nepal have a very special journey. They are connected culturally, economically, diplomatically, and they have also been having people to people contacts as well. We have open borders, and that is the type of trusty relationship that we have had with Nepal. But this has been changed in the last couple of days, and this is due to changes that have been introduced by the Nepal Parliament with respect to the second constitutional amendment bill, where it takes certain parts of India into the political map of Nepal. This has been a major issue, and before this issue spirals out, before this issue goes out of control, this has to be resolved amicably by dialogue, political will and diplomatic action, says the article. According to this article, it further says that in the past, the monarchy which was ruling the Nepal had taken certain steps which was for the goodwill of India and Nepal. The same steps can be changed by the present government, which can open the Pandora's box, reverse all the old commitment and open the unsecured border posts, and that could haunt India very badly, says the article. In order to overcome this, the political will have to be taken up, and the Modi government will have to start speaking to the Nepal administration, is what this article all about. For the rest of the analysis, you can look into our previous CNAs to give you a clear-cut analogy and explanation about this issue. Now let's look into the next article. This article says making public transport safe during COVID-19. India imposed the lockdown, and one of the major steps taken by India during this lockdown was suspension of the travelling activity. As there was suspension of the travelling activity, trains, buses and number of other public transport was suspended immediately. Why was this step taken? So that infection does not spread to the hinterlands and it does not take virus to other areas which has not been touched by it. This is something great that has been initiated by the government. Now what we have is Unlock 1.0, where economic activities have resumed, people have started moving from one region to another, and public transport has also opened as well. But there are some issues. What are those issues? In case there is a person who has been infected by the COVID-19, he does not have any idea about it and is asymptomatic. Let's suppose he travels in metro, he travels in railway, he travels in buses. The minute he has traveled, in case he has touched upon a pole or the grab handle in the metro trails or in the buses, the same person can infect multiple other people as well. And this could raise the number of infections, and as a result, this can be very disastrous. So how do we overcome this issue is what this article all about. According to the author and according to this article, there has been a fear of COVID-19. People who were previously traveling in the public sector transport are now using the private vehicles. Why are they using private vehicles? Because they fear that they could get infected. And as a result of increase of private activities, what we have is increase in pollution. The author goes on to say that the number of people who have been killed with respect to pollution and with respect to accidents is comparatively greater than with respect to COVID-19. So what he asks the government is to take certain precautionary measures so that more people start opting for the public transport system. So what are the suggestions given by the author? The author says that special precautions will have to be taken to ensure that all the surfaces are cleaned and sanitization of all coaches and buses takes up after every trip and a deep sanitization at the end of the day. They will also have to keep wiping it after every trip, and at the same time the sanitizers will also have to be provided in all the metro trails, railways as well as in the buses. Queue control system will have to be imposed, says the author. Queues will have to be strictly organized, controlled by the numbers and maintained to get onto the trails, metros as well as buses. In case you are not able to control the number of people, the Central Industrial Security Force may also be called on to extend all these reinforcements with respect to queue control, says the author. E-ticketing, where mobile-based applications can also be introduced, where cash exchange can be minimized, which also leads to eventual spread of the virus, are some of the suggestions given by the author. So according to the author, it is not only the responsibility of the government, it is also the responsibility of the individuals as well. The government may come up with number of steps and approaches to reduce the impact of COVID-19. The people will also have to take the responsibility. The government may keep up the sanitizers in the buses as well as in the railways, but it's the people who have to use it. So it is the responsibility of the people and the government simultaneously to engage in this activity to reduce the spread of COVID-19 and use the public transport system effectively, is what this article all about. Now let's look into the next article. This article says Supreme Court to extend virtual court system amid COVID-19 crisis. Previously, what we had was the open court principle. What is this open court? You have the judges sitting, you have the advocates fighting for the litigants, you have the litigants in the court premises, and you also have the media taking and looking all the evidences that are presented before the judge. So this is what is called as open court, where everything is present and people and litigants would be able to see what is exactly happening with respect to the judicial proceedings. With respect to this open court principle, the Supreme Court has also reaffirmed the importance of open court principle in Naresh Sridhar Mirakar and others versus the state of Maharashtra and others. In this judgment, the Supreme Court has spoken about the open court principle. It says that open court principle will be able to deliver justice to the people of India. Why? When there is public gaze, when people are looking into the arguments, they will have a fair idea of how the court is working. This will also prevent the hegemony of the judiciary. This will also keep a check of the judicial excesses, and also what will happen is that this will create confidence of the people in fairness, objectivity and impartiality in administration of justice. That is why the open court principle is very important. Further, this open court principle also supports the idea of freedom of speech and expression, that which is espoused under Article 19 of the Indian Constitution. The Article 19 also supports the freedom of press as well. So the press would be able to be party to this particular argument, and people will also be party to this argument, ultimately delivering justice to the people of India. Only in certain important cases, where special and limited cases, that which is prescribed by law, such proceedings will require that people and media out of the courts. In rest of the scenarios, what we will have is the open court principle. But this open court principle is currently violated. Why? What we currently have is called as the virtual courts because of increase in the COVID-19. You have the judges who will be listening to this particular case, and you also have the advocates who will be filing their petitions, submissions through video links from their homes or offices. So the court calls this as the virtual court system. In the present scenario, a committee of 7 Supreme Court judges led by Justice N.V. Ramana has decided to continue the virtual court system and not revert back to the open court principle of physical hearing, as there is increase of the COVID-19 cases. Further, the court has also said that there will be a particular time given by the courts where they would be able to decide whether they have to continue with the virtual court system or go back to the open court principle. To understand What is this virtual court system? Go back to 28th April 2020 under the second topic where we have had an elaborate analysis for the same. It is this that we have to understand with respect to this article. Now let's look into some of the preliminary practice questions. Consider the following statements with respect to Rhacophorus disease. It is a tick-borne viral hemorrhage fever. The disease was first reported in 1957 from the state of Tamil Nadu. Which of the above statements are correct? The answer to this is one only. Why? The disease was first reported not in the state of Tamil Nadu, but this was in the state of Karnataka. Why have we taken this practice question? Because of the mention given under this article. To understand what this Rhacophorus disease is all about, go back to 7th of November 2019 under the third topic to get an elaborate idea of what this disease is all about. Now let's look into the next practice question. With reference to Rhacophorus malabaricus, which is the Malabar gliding frog, which of the following statements are correct? It is endemic to the rainforest of Western Ghats. Its IUCN status is vulnerable. Males are smaller than the females. Which of them are correct? The answer to this is 1 and 3 only. Why? Its IUCN status is not vulnerable. It is least concern. Why have we taken this practice question? Because of the reference given under this article. Kindly remember, its IUCN status is least concern and it is not vulnerable. Now let's look into the next practice question. Consider the following statements with respect to earthquakes. The point where the energy is released is called as the epicenter. The point on the surface nearest to the focus is called as hypocenter. Which of the above statements are incorrect? It is asking for the incorrect statement, so the answer to this is both. Why? Let's look into the explanation. The point where the energy is released is called as the focus of the earthquake. It is also called as hypocenter. The energy waves traveling in different directions reach the surface. The point on the surface nearest to the focus is called as epicenter. Why have we taken this practice question? Because of the reference given under this article. Now let's look into the next practice question. Indian Ocean Commission is an intergovernmental organization consisting of Comoros, Madagascar, Mauritius, Reunion, Seychelles. Which of them are part of this intergovernmental organization? The answer to this is 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5. Why have we taken this practice question? Because of the reference given under this article. Kindly remember, an elaborate analysis for this has been explained on 7th March 2020 under the 7th topic, India joins Indian Ocean Commission as observer. So kindly look into it. Now let's look into the next practice question. What is the provision to safeguard the autonomy of the Supreme Court of India? While appointing the Supreme Court judges, the President of India has to consult the Chief Justice of India. Yes, this is right. The Supreme Court judges can be removed by the Chief Justice of India only. This is wrong. It is the Parliament with the order of the President. The salaries of judges are charged on the Consolidated Fund of India, to which the legislature does not have right to vote. Yes, this is right. All appointments of officers and staffs of the Supreme Court of India are made by the government of only after consulting the Chief Justice of India. This is wrong. So the answer to this is 1 and 3 only. Now let's look into the mains practice question. What are the dire consequences of discrimination? Do you think India needs an anti-discrimination law to reverse our deep-rooted culture of discrimination? Next question. Public transport system has to be revamped to balance people's safety and mobility amidst COVID-19 crisis discuss. So please write all your answers on the comment section so that you guys can have a peer review and also come up with constructive criticism in case of any. So this is it for today. Thank you for watching. All the best.